Hey guys, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're talking about how you parents can be taking better photos of your kids. Let's get into this one.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Holy cow, I actually just finished recording with today's guest, and I'm on like a bit of a high. Like I have like high spirits. This was a really great interview with today's guests. Super knowledgeable, and really excited to teach what he does. So I really cannot wait for you guys to get into this episode of the podcast. A little bit about my week. I guess we'll just go ahead and get on into it. Last week I was supposed to talk about it, but I ended up talking about the whole Rachel Ray thing, which just aired on Thursday, which was crazy. But the Dodgers are in the World Series. Like, holy cow, the Dodgers are in the World Series. This is not a sports podcast, so I won't go too far into it. But man, I have been so excited. Like these past 2 weeks have just been insane for me, my family, my spirits, my excitement, the Dodgers, all these weddings that I've had back to back. It's been so fulfilling of a fall for me. There's nothing like baseball in October. It's truly one of the greatest. It's just great. So I just had to share that. I had to get that out there. I can't say in my intro that I'm a Los Angeles Dodger fan and not even mention that they're in the freaking World Series. Like this is great. Best team in the National League, and hopefully both the National and the American League will prove it here soon. Hopefully by the time you hear this, we've already won the World Series. Hopefully they won last night on Sunday against the Astros in Houston. But anyway, I really don't have anything to plug today. This episode was one of the longest that I've ever done, and like I said, it was just content packed, and it was so much fun to do that I really don't want to take up too much of your time. If you guys are so gracious, I will say that, holidays are coming up. I know personally I'm going to be buying a lot of things on Amazon for the holiday season. I'm just going to have it shipped to my mom. I'm going to, you can add gift notes and everything in there. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And I hope that you're going to be doing the same thing just because it's easy, it's convenient, and you're not going, out on Black Friday, which who wants to do that? I actually have a story about Black Friday and my camera getting stolen, but we'll get into that later. But if you're buying things for people, Amazon is the way to go. And if you want to help out the podcast, if you enjoy this episode, and trust me, you will, I would be so appreciative of your time to just go to the beginnerphotographypodcast.com first and click on our Amazon associate link. Whatever you buy on Amazon, it'll take you straight to Amazon. Whatever you buy there, we are going to get a tiny percentage of as a commission from Amazon. And for me, it's like a thank you for your time. I just really want to thank you guys so much for being there, for listening. Like I said, that's it. You guys know the spiel. I'm not going to get too far into this. I want you guys to just enjoy this interview. Like I said, it's a long one, so get into it. Get ready. Enjoy this interview with Kyle Shultz. Today's guest runs the popular educational photography site Shultz Photo School. He's focused on teaching parents how to take better of their kids. And as a parent and a photographer himself, who better to learn from? So today, I'm super excited to have Kyle Shultz. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Raymond, I'm honored to be here. It's been fun talking to you with a little bit just before the show started. I feel like we could talk all day just about the Dodgers, the Cubs, raising kids, living in the Midwest, all of the above.
I can't believe we've already spent like 16 minutes just talking about just life in general before we started this thing.
Yeah, but no, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good, right on, man. So I want to start, obviously, we'll focus on photography, not so much the Dodgers and the Cubs, of course. But
yeah. I
want to know how you got your start in photography.
That's a great question. It takes me back a long time ago. So I grew up on the ball field to kind of parlay the Dodgers and Cubs into it a little bit. And after I went to small college, played ball there, and after college, to kind of stay physical and active, I bought a bike and I would take these long bike rides and just see beautiful scenes out there in the middle of nowhere in southern Illinois and think, I need a camera. So I literally bought like a little Canon like G3 at the time. That's how it all started, was just a hobby. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Strengths Finder, but it basically, I won't go into it, but my number one strength according to that whole test is learner. And so in typical fashion, I bought all the Kelby books, all the normal books, that Peterson, like how to see creatively, understanding exposure, probably about 12 titles from Amazon. I just dug in, and I fell in love with photography, all just to like take my little camera on my back on my bike rides, Well, probably like so many people, they notice some pictures. You get asked to take a little picture of this and that, a little kid here, a little kid there. And then lo and behold, like a wedding. And it just grew very quickly, kind of blew up in my face. So it was like 2005 that I bought my first real camera, a Canon 20D, a DSLR. And by 2007, January 1st of 2007, I was full-time as wedding and portraits. So really about a year and a half. And it just grew word of mouth. I was working for a great organization at the time called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, a little nonprofit. It was a great marriage of kind of two passions in my life, faith and sports. I was happy in it, but it grew so much. I had 20 weddings booked in 2007, and I didn't want to cheat the day job. So I knew I just needed to like go for it or not, and I went for it, and I guess the rest was history. So started as a hobby, and a lot of self-learning.
You can't just say the rest is history. Like there's a lot of stuff in there.
There is a lot of stuff, but as far as the start, it was just a passion, a hobby. I really dove in head first to really learn as much as I could. We talked a little bit before the show about the fraud syndrome and feeling like, I didn't go get a degree for this. Of course, I was on kind of the beginning of the mom-tographer, dad-tographer deal where a lot of people weren't formally educated. And honestly, there's a blessing. I went to a lot of workshops, these weekend workshops by working pros where you learn as much in 16 hours, 2 8-hour days as I think you do in a year of, well, we won't go down that. But anyway, I did spend a lot of time learning. And from 2007 to 2012, I ran a very busy studio and grew to where we had a whole studio on a couple acres, like a separate property. I did about 45 weddings a year and 300 portrait sessions a year, and had a couple full-time people working for me. And we were very fortunate, and it was fun. Like many people who get there, I did burn out. I worked too much. I had no margin. I got a little bitter, and I became a firefighter in 2012. I know this is the crazy story ever. Literally became
a firefighter,
like a professional paid firefighter, because I don't know if this is where we want to go in the podcast, but I'll make this really quick. It was so busy as I looked at life, how it was, and with more kids being born every couple of years, I thought, I don't know that I want to shoot 45 weddings a year every Saturday. And so I was just kind of looking for something to pull back the wedding photography deal a bit, and then maybe keep the portrait stuff going. And I won't go into the crazy chapter of firefighting, but except to say that I did become a firefighter thinking this could be perfect. I work every third day. I could still shoot some weddings and some portraits. I don't have to totally axe what has become a wonderful business, but it would give me some leverage to say no to weekends, So that was kind of some of the story there. Well, in the meantime, this thing called Shultz Photo School that I'd started at my studio to help parents take better pics of their kids. So I did it in my studio, just with 8 to 10 moms and dads at a time. I always thought that I wanted to take it online. But when you own a studio, you never have time to do anything else. You're always getting the next shoot edited and out the door. So when I became a firefighter, I finally had a little bit of margin. And I was still shooting, on the side, but just got to say no to a lot more weddings, just did a handful. I'd had some margin to put Shultz Photo School online. And really in 2015, Shultz Photo School reached a tipping point. And now Shultz Photo School is what I do full time. So no longer a firefighter. It was a great chapter. I wouldn't change it for anything. I learned a lot about the world, a lot about myself, saw crazy things. It was wonderful. But Shultz Photo School is what I do full time now. And as far as like session work, it's few and far in between. I'm very selective.
I totally understand that. I totally understand that. So I have to ask though, how did you go from, obviously you had a studio, you were very busy. You started Shultz Photo School in person, little meetings.
Right.
How did that start? Were parents just asking you how to take better? Were these parents of portrait sessions that you were having? How did this start?
No, that's a great question. So I'll just be honest. I listened to, I read a guy's book when I first went into photography called 48 Days to the Work You Love. It's a great book by a guy named Dan Miller. And then I kind of followed Dan Miller, and he has this saying that I've never forgot. He says, if I hear the same question 3 times, I turn it into a product. And so at weddings, I would always, almost every wedding, have some parent come up to me as, everything calmed down, you're on the dance floor at the reception sort of deal. And they come with their camera and say, Schultzy, I bought this new camera, because Junior was born. And I'm just underwhelmed with it. I mean, you got any tips? What am I doing wrong? And it wasn't just 3 times I heard that, it was 36 times or
Every
300
wedding.
times. Yeah. And so in the spirit of Dan, I was thinking we should do something here. And I always had the idea of an online thing there because it was, you could get that out to so many more people. And if there was so many people asking, and of course parents are busy, I always thought that an online thing that they could do in their jammies on the couch would work so much better than an in-person workshop. But to pilot the idea and to really do good market research, so to speak, to know your avatar well, I wanted to start in person in the studio for those who would be willing. So we started, and my studio was a farmhouse, so the living room was our shooting room, and so I could really only fit, 10 to 12 people. That's why we had 8 to 12 people per time we did it. And I really did it about 4 or 5 times, and we would meet. It was a month-long course, and it was just called Shultz Photo School at the time because, you don't have time to, that's just what it was. My studio was Shultz Photography, so I'm like, this should just be called Shultz Photo School. It was marketed as a 1-month class where we would meet every Monday night at the studio for an hour and a half, and then I would send them email lessons and little exercises on Tuesday through Friday.
Oh.
And that gave me the chance to hear and see what worked and hear the questions that they really ask and really see firsthand where they struggled. And after I did that 4 or 5 times, I really felt like we had the core of a curriculum that would work for a busy parent. And then it just took getting it all online, right? Which is then you become like a web developer. You're bootstrapping this. You don't want to pay $20,000 to have someone else do it because there's not $20,000. And so it was really a slow process getting it up online through many iterations. But here today, it is. It was 2015 where it really grew. The online portion of it. I got the website up kind of through 2013 and 2014, just kind of duct taping pieces together. Buy now button appeared. It worked. They got access. But in 2015, the Shultz Photo School audience as far as online went from about 2,500 subscribers to 55,000.
Wow.
So 2015 was a big kind of tipping point where it just gathered momentum, and that's a whole different story too to how that happened. But there's never one magic bullet. There's always a few things that are kind of consistent direction day by day that add up to some growth. But, yeah.
Well, there's no denying that that you've been very successful with the school and that people love it. That's how I found you through our past interview with Vinny Puglisi. You did a course with him for sports photography. And when he obviously reached out to me, asked if I wanted to be an affiliate. I checked out the website, and I thought, this is it, man. I don't think that there are many places online that teach beginners the way that you do, and that's why I knew that I had to get you on. And it's clear that your fans are very passionate about you. So you mentioned earlier, if somebody asks you something 3 times, turn it into a product, right? So
Yeah.
you're at weddings and people are asking you like, hey, I got this camera. I don't know what I'm doing with this thing. Like, what do I do? What would you tell them? What would you tell somebody today if they came up to you at a wedding and said, hey, what's something that I should do right now to start taking better photos with this brand new fancy camera that I seem to be underwhelmed with?
Sure, that's a great question. And I would, for the most part, people, I know that there's this tendency to get all geeky and say, well, you need to learn how to shoot in manual. This camera's really great. You just got to learn how to drive it. I would steer the other direction. I like to give parents quick wins, wins that will make a big difference for their pictures without understanding the camera at all. Mm-hmm. Let's face it, these cameras are great. Even our iPhones are great.
Absolutely.
Auto exposure has gotten so much better than it was 10 years ago because most cameras, if you buy it within the past couple of years, have better algorithms to recognize faces and scenes and backlight and all that kind of stuff. And even if not, like you can edit it in the back end. Like auto, for the most part, I mean, sure, we do want to get parents to the point where they can drive their camera manual because then it just becomes fun. It becomes fun to see an image in your mind and then nail it in camera without any editing. That's where we all want to go to, but that's like third base, you know? It's not first base. So first base, to get back to your question, specifically what you're asking is I would give them a few composition rules right off the bat. So number one, I would say fill the frame. Parents, for the most part, are always, just leaving too much distraction, too much around the central subject. And so I tell people all the time, first, just fill the frame. Get closer to your subject, especially if your subject is your kid, which 99% of my audience who's asking me for a tip, their subject is their kid. It's not a landscape. Although landscape, it still applies. What do you want in your frame? Be intentional about what's in your frame. The next thing I'd tell parents is to get a better perspective, meaning 99% of parents, their perspective is 5 foot 10 inches or 5 foot 8 inches down. So you have concrete as backgrounds, carpet as backgrounds, any kind of floor as the background, right? And when you get just 3 foot lower, and so choose a better perspective means get really high or lower. And I always say the easy button with kids is just get on eye level. Mm-hmm. Squat down. So I'm thinking of, Charlie, your little 5-year-old, or it might be Parker. That's 5. I don't know.
It's Charlie. You got
it's
it.
One
right.
of them. So they're 3.5 foot tall. So I'm saying is like the easy button is to get your camera down on eye level. It'll do 2 things. One, it'll change the background completely. You'll go from grounds and grass and dirt and concrete and pizza on the floor to a much deeper background, a good wall, a horizon. And that deeper background will also give your camera space for your subject to kind of pop off the background. It'll give your camera the separation it needs. And then 2, it'll just be a much more intimate perspective of your kiddo instead of them kind of looking up at the top of their eyes or whatever. It'll just be the perspective that you see of them when you're down, give them a hug and whatnot.
Of course.
So those are 2 quick ones. But then, I would go towards I would probably then like leave out even leading lines and negative space at that point, although we're really close to that. But certainly maybe the next thing I'd say is like use the rule of thirds. So I give them 3 quick ones. Like 1 is fill that frame, 2 is get a better perspective, and then don't put your subject right in the middle of the frame. And I'd give them a little 1-minute tip about, imagine putting a tic-tac-toe grid over your screen, over your viewfinder when you look, and place your kid's like head in one of those intersections, or if it's a full length, like along one of the right sides, or along one of the right or left lines, or if it's a really close one, if you're really doing just head and shoulders, you're really filling the frame like we want you to in number 1, then place the eye in one of those intersections. And so I like with the parents anyway, to start with those easy tips that can make a world of difference without them even understanding their camera at all.
Of course.
Because, they'll get, at the end of the day, like if we can teach people about composition and then lighting, I mean, it makes all the difference.
It's just a good base to start on. And people can do it with their iPhones, which is what I love.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you get it a lot. Beginners are saying, I want to take better photos, but maybe either I don't have money for a nice camera or all I have is the cell phone in
Sure.
my pocket. And it's like those
Absolutely.
tips are great for those people. They're universal, and they're something that can be built on for years as well. So
Yeah, and you
those
know
are both
what?
great tips.
On my standpoint too, and I'll do this real quick, but like the iPhone, I've needed to release an iPhone course for parents for 2 years, and I know I need it, and we're finally releasing it this Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Black
wow,
Friday.
cool.
We're kind of putting it out there. The iPhone photography course for parents is what it's going to be called. But the first two modules, the first module's all composition, the second module's all lighting and natural light. You know, obviously it's an iPhone, so it's just going to be natural light. Although there is new lights that you can now have. Anyway, I'm not going to go to that. You can actually trigger a strobe now. It's awesome.
Really? I didn't know that. I'm going to have to look into that.
Yeah, Godox just released this little thing called the A1 to where you can trip a strobe with your iPhone. It's awesome. It's really
This
cool.
world that we live in.
I know. Anyway, the first two modules, composition and lighting, they're the timeless things, and they're the things that make the most difference. The third module will be iPhone tips and tricks. You know, it'll stop just short of understanding exposure, but the composition and lighting are the things that we'll still need to learn in order to take a good picture 50 years from now and 100 years from now, when the cameras, who knows what cameras we have then, right? But it will still require us to be creative as far as see the image in our mind and get our subject in light that works. So for sure, I just think that those are the two staples. And people ask me that, like, neighbors and people who know me, Shultz, what are you going to do when these cameras are so good that it puts you out of business? And I'm just like, you know what? I hope that it gets to that point, because I'm that passionate about photography for parents. Like, I hope that it does. But it's not going to come anytime soon. And even when cameras get that good, most of what I teach is the stuff that's been taught for 100 years. And cameras have changed a lot since then.
Absolutely.
As far as when it comes to photography, lighting and composition, storytelling, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff that comes with photojournalism.
It also
and looking
applies.
how to see creatively. I just don't think that the camera is ever going to do that magically.
Right, because you can't physically, or I guess through software, the camera can't move itself. There's still going to have to be somebody operating the camera.
Still going to have to be someone telling it where to snap.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to my next point, is that you mentioned storytelling there, right? And I understand as a photographer how important that can be. And there are also, a lot of people who maybe are past step 0. Maybe they understand a little bit about aperture priority or even slightly shooting manual. When me and my family goes out this last weekend, right? We went to a pumpkin patch, took the kids. They had a great old time. And every time I go out, I want to document this. It's going to be a nice, fun activity. I bring out the camera, and I know that there's certain shots that I have to get, right? I have to get something wide, establishing. Here we are. We're at a pumpkin patch, right? We got a sign in there. We got some pumpkins in the background. I want to get something, medium. Maybe the kids running around, just being kids, having fun. And then something close up. Them trying to, pull the vine off a pumpkin or feeling the hay in the hayride or something.
Perfect. Yep.
Try to get some emotion in there. But it kind of gets to the point, it's like, okay, all of those shots apply for wherever we're going. There's an IKEA that just opened up in Indianapolis. It's like, okay, I know that I need to get a wide shot of us, of IKEA before we walk in. We got to get shots of the kids in the cart. Now I got to get close-ups of them playing with little toys. It's like all of these things start to feel stale at some point. You know what I mean? So it's like, even though these are good tips and the photos turn out, pretty good, when it comes to telling the story, what sorts of tips would you give to people who are just kind of doing, how should I phrase this differently? There's think of it like a shot list, right? There's the wide, the medium, and the close-up.
Yeah.
How can you tell a story beyond that? Do you have any tips for that?
Well, that's a really good question, man. And I would actually start with what you said, because that is such a good foundation. I mean, if you think of how a movie starts, it always starts at 24 millimeters, scenes everywhere. And it's literally setting the context. And so I would just reemphasize, you say it's, getting stale, but you've done it forever. A lot of people, they've heard that for the first time. And I say, think of the beginning of a movie where they are setting the scene with 24 millimeter after 24 millimeter. And then, like you said, then all of a sudden they get to 50 millimeters or 85, you know what I mean? And they kind of introduce maybe, oh, there's a character there. And so the same thing when you're out of the pumpkin patch. I love that you start with wide scene setting. You've got to have context. and then you said you go in a little bit closer. Here is my subject. But that's what every story needs. It needs a context first, and then a subject second. And then, of course, you mentioned going into those who are fortunate enough, 135 or 200 millimeters. That's awesome. Or you just get really close with your 85.
I just get close. I just use my 35. I just get really close.
Exactly. And so where do you get detail? You mentioned emotion. So the things that I would say there to maybe go to the next level, every powerful story has a character who wants something, and they have to overcome an obstacle to get it. So every movie, that's the premise of it. If we don't know what the character wants in the movie by like 45 minutes into it, we're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, this is the most boring movie ever. Usually movies do a good job of setting up the context, and then you know the character, and then pretty quickly you know what that character wants. And then they're faced with all kinds of obstacles, But when we're at the pumpkin patch, it's like, okay, what do we want here? I mean, it gets hard, right? It gets really hard to apply it. But I will still say that just to kind of stretch. Can we show like the character that has to go from some point to? And so for you, it might just be like, oh man, what if little I'm looking down, Charlie was, just struggled and terrified to get on the hayrack ride.
Right.
And you kind of document that little portion of where it went from terrified and he got on it, and then you see the smile after.
Right.
All I'm saying that the next level is taking the viewer through a transformation. That's what great story does, right? So it's hard to do. It's you have to storyboard it, right? That's why movies, everyday stuff at the pumpkin patch, it's really hard to do that. But to kind of rewind a little bit, but let me say this real quick. Parents, where I love them to think about this is documenting their kids through seasons of life, sometimes through a summer baseball league. And if you can really, through many pictures, tell the story of their little 10-year-old starting practice in April and all the fears and stuff, and then show the progression of victory, of hitting the baseball, of winning the games and stuff, and maybe making it to like their little kids'
pizza party or whatever afterwards.
Yeah, pizza party, or like their version of the postseason.
Of course, yeah.
The tournament. You kind of document that. You have a much better chance as a parent to tell the story of like the journey through a season of life, even if it's just a summer, than just one trip to the pumpkin patch, where kind of the objective is to have a good time or whatever. That's the big one.
Of course.
But to rewind a little bit, what you said with emotion, one tip I'd give there is that, and we said this in the sports photography course for parents with Vinny Puglisi, who you mentioned before, and that was such a fun course. Love Vinny. We've had such a fun time together. But in that course, to help parents think of how to capture emotion, one tip that we gave was that in the word emotion is another word, motion. So emotion. And a lot of times the most powerful images that reveal emotion are when you are capturing some sort of motion and it's a little micro movement of it. So think of like on a sports field, it's like that fist pump, like that little bit of motion. If you get that of, Jansen, or going back to the Dodgers. If you get that motion in it, it makes the emotion really come alive.
Of course. And
so at the hayrack ride, it would definitely be, or at the pumpkin patch, it would definitely be like the moment they are throwing the hay up into the air with a smile. It's not just the smile. It's some motion with the smile, some sort of action motion with the facial expression, all that really tends to give the emotion more presence and power in a still image.
Of
if
course.
That makes sense. So one thing with kids I always tell parents is try and look for emotion and that's combined with emotion and go for it. Those are the ones that'll have the most impact at the end.
I love it. I think that was a great answer right there. I really wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel, right? I guess I love what you're saying though, dude. And the other thing for stories, even for the pumpkin patch, like beginning, middle, and end, like all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. Right.
And sometimes even to make sure that you, as parents, we're so I'm guilty of this too. Oh, let's just get a few to document it, which I do all the time. I'm not like speaking down to that at all. But our tendency is like, let's take like a minute of pictures and then go live life, which I think you should do too. That's part of why I actually tell parents who sign up for Shultz Photo School, one thing that I want you to do is I want you to understand your camera enough to where at the pumpkin patch of the whole hour, you're not cursing at your camera for 55 minutes of it, trying to get the good fix. That you take it out for a minute at a time in the beginning, middle, and end and get your picture within a minute and know that you've got it. And then the rest of the time you're present with your kids and your family, and you're not the photographer. But even just beginning, middle, and end can be one more tip for like telling a complete story.
Yeah, I guess. First of all, it's funny that you had mentioned, not getting to the point where you're mad at your camera, because as we were at the pumpkin patch. Obviously, lots of parents, lots of cameras there, and there was one mom with her 5D Mark IV, and she had this huge bag of lenses and stuff that she kept switching out, and they were all, it was a 51.2, it was the 85.1.2, and I was like, my gosh,
wow.
you are getting great pictures of your kid, I mean, I totally understand that, but at the same time, you're missing out on playing with your kid, and it's a delicate balance because you do want to capture something great, but you also want to be there for your kids. So
absolutely,
I totally understand that. And here I am with just my little Fuji X70, and I was like, I'm gonna flip it up and we're gonna take a selfie real quick. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Nope, I agree.
I think that it's interesting that you said, obviously, me having gone to film school. I'd mentioned that before we started recording. I guess there are some sort of things that I still sometimes see as, well, this is just what you do. But when it comes to the beginner, it's maybe it's not as obvious. So
totally.
I guess just thank you for pointing that out to me.
No, for you there, that is definitely like a symptom of the curse of knowledge. You have so much knowledge in your head that you think it's level 2 to people, but I guarantee it's level 7 or 8 to everyone listening to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just because you're at a level 10 with how a story works. But you're right on the money there.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about beginners. You, as an educator, you have to see a ton of pictures from either students of yours or fellow friends and family and neighbors, asking for you to say, like, what do you think about this photo? Trying to get some sort of critique. Is there something that you see in a photo and immediately you're like, oh, this is a beginner photo. This should not be done.
Yeah, I think that I would have to unfortunately go back to what I said before. The beginning photo is at 5'6" tall. Right. It's looking down. It's their kid in the middle of the frame,
like
tiny
30 feet away.
In the middle of the frame, like 30 feet away, with a bunch of space around that is more than just context. It's noise. So there is not just one subject. There's 3 or maybe 7. Just a lot of busyness in the photo, and maybe slightly overexposed, but even more than that, it's just the perspective and a total lack of discipline as far as what the subject is. You know what I mean? Probably, but gosh, the whole critique thing. I have finally started doing photo critiques for our grads program because it just doesn't fit my personality well. To be like, oh, here's what you can do better.
I get it, man.
But people are finding it very, very helpful, way more helpful than I thought it would be. So it is important. So I don't know where I'm going with that. Besides,
I get it.
If you showed me a picture, I'd say, dude, you're doing such a good job. Just keep going. Like maybe. Yeah. But if there's a dead giveaway, it's 5'6" kid in the middle of the frame with lots of noise around the picture.
Gotcha.
Really struggle with. There's too many places for the eye to go. You know what I mean? Whereas if just with a few staple kind of composition theories, foundational stuff, you can really direct the viewer's eye to where you want her eye to go. So things like the rule of thirds or leading lines or balance or negative space, stuff like that can really be like, oh my gosh, this person's at least read like a book or taken a quick course, or they're just naturally gifted. But to be honest, I think that 99% of even working professionals, I say this over and over again, that I shot full time for 5 years. I consider myself creative in the sense of that I like to create things, but I don't consider myself artistic. I look at some photographers, I'm like, they are artistic. They have something that I don't as far as my eye. But I truly admire them. I really, truly admire like the Jeremy Cowarts of the world who just are artists. But I don't consider myself one. Nor do I consider like 99% of the working pros who I see out there. And I don't say that to speak badly towards me or towards others. I'm just saying that that's how powerful these foundational compositional guidelines are. That you can just follow things like perspective and rule of thirds and leading lines and balance and counterbalance and negative space, all this kind of things, and look freakishly creative, ingeniously creative when you're just following simple rules. You know what I mean? And so, and then unfortunately, I mean, the people who end up having great businesses, almost 9 times out of 10, they just become really good at running a business and giving good customer service. Unfortunately, like shooting great pictures is just not enough, because very few people even know what a good picture is.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I think it's hard to give a critique, is because photography is subjective. And I was actually just having a chat this morning in our Facebook group from somebody who used selective coloring, which sometimes can work, But I just think that in this instance it didn't, because it was the yellow color of a tree, and it was like down a long street. There were strong leading lines going to a horizon, but the only thing that was in color was like splotches of yellows within the trees, and it just made my eyes bounce around. And I had brought that up because honestly, like maybe if the trees were, all one color, I think that might look cool, But at the same time, it's whatever you like, honestly. It's whatever
it's
you
so
like.
subjective,
Makes a good
exactly.
Photo. So I totally understand critiques.
I find with most of my people, which I don't know if we want to get in at some point, but I really see my lane to run in as my calling is to teach people who have no clue about photography. They don't even know they love it yet. But so most of my people, their critique would be their eyes are a little closed, or that smile isn't the best. You know what I mean? Honestly, expression is a big part of photography, especially photography of our kids. But it seems like the definition of a good photo to 9 out of 10 of people who are just joining Shultz Photo School is all about, well, that's a great smile, or or their eyes aren't closed, So
of course.
It is all subjective, just to kind of hammer home on your point about selective coloring versus, some people could see a picture with thousands of distractions, but if it's got the perfect smile, it's the perfect photo.
Right. The moment always trumps, so.
Yeah.
I kind of want to move a little bit from the less subjective, obviously, to the critiques and stuff. And I want to ask, because one thing that I think is arguably one of the most important things in life is simply just family photos, right? I mean, my grandma has lost like so much in her life, right? From houses, cars, accidents that have happened, but yet family photos are always the thing that have to stay. She carries those things everywhere with her, and I understand it's like this transportation back in time. We're in this new age of digital. It's tough to know where things are going to be going. Is everything going to be in the cloud? Should we just resort to keep printing things? I want to know how you keep your photos safe for the future.
That's a great question. So I spent 4 years as a full-time firefighter, and thankfully we covered that just a tiny bit. So what I tell everyone, all the people in Shultz Photo School, and I have some blog posts about this we could maybe put in the show notes and whatnot. I do keep things local on a Drobo. So personally, I just have a Drobo. It's
on.
What I had since, and I realize they're so expensive as an entry point. You could do it for so much cheaper. But as one who also, shot for a lot of clients once upon a time and occasionally very picky, shoot for clients now, I just want a very automated thing, and it's what I've had forever. But so I keep my files in-house, but I would just have to say to everyone listening, if that's all you're doing, it's not enough. Because as a firefighter, I have seen everything destroyed dozens of times. Everything, including hard drives. One was in the basement and one was upstairs. And some people are like, well, I take one hard drive to my husband's work, or, whatever, I'm like, okay, but that is such a complex system. You can't keep up complex systems for long. And so I'm a huge fan of the cloud, And I use two services personally, and I've tried a lot of them. But personally, what I do now, so I do keep them local because you always just feel somewhat.
The speed, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, the speed for coming back and all that, and it gives me still a little bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling to have them local.
They're all right
but it's
here.
not enough. I would not have the warm, fuzzy feeling if I did not have them on the cloud. So I love Google Photos right now. It's the most fun I've ever had with cloud storage. It sends me these little animations every day, these little movies that it automatically creates with music. It is fun. The recognition for facial recognition is freaky good. I will give you one specific example. My grandpa passed away a couple of years ago, and I was at his funeral, and I was taking pictures with my iPhone. You know, at a funeral, I'll have all like the pictures everywhere. And so I took a picture of my grandpa, like one when he was a farmer, one when he was probably about 50, 45 or so. And then one when he was a little kid at 8 years old. Google Photos mapped his face to the same person.
No way.
I kid you not. From a picture I took with my iPhone of other pictures from the age 8 to age 45, 50. Wow. And it's done it with my kids to a T. It is freaky good. I have blog posts about this showing you how this works. It's also – so Google Photos is so good at me finding my pictures now that I don't even do tags and keywords and all that stuff in Lightroom anymore. Who has time as a parent to do that? I mean, so I'm kind of speaking from my audience's point of view. No one has time to go color label their pictures. Holy smokes. Google, I can literally go in there and type in Traeger, which is the name of my oldest boy, and then some activity like swimming. And I kid you not, it will pull up every picture of Traeger near water.
Yes.
Sometimes it gets fooled, like it treats our cul-de-sac asphalt as a pool because it's wet and it sees that reflection. But good enough, right?
Of course, yeah.
Or I can do like Traeger red. It will show me pictures of Traeger wearing red. I kid you not.
Insane.
It is freaky good. It's also free. If you let it downsize your pictures, downsize to 16 megapixels or 18 or whatever it is, it's completely free. Mm-hmm. And people are like, well, it downsizes. I'm like, it's free. If you want to pay, you can. And it's pretty cheap. It's $99 a year for like a terabyte or something like that. So I do the paid version, and I'm happy to do it. So I love Google Photos. I have the software installed on my phone, on Julie's phone. Julie's my wife, and on my computer, to where all my real pictures with my real DSLR and my mirrorless, and all my pictures with my phone and then Julie's phone are automatically pulled into Google Photos at all times, at every day. And then Google does its magic on sorting them, and it's so cool. It is turnkey. Since I'm also an Amazon Prime member, Amazon Photos is included, and it's just another little trinket that I can install on my desktop, to where it pulls up anything that I have on from my real camera. You know, my fancy camera.
Of course, yeah.
I'm shooting with like a Sony A9 these days and loving it. And so it'll pull all those photos into Amazon as well. And I figured I might as well, because I'm a Prime member for other reasons, you know, all the awesomeness that comes with Prime. And it just happens to, if I have the Amazon Photos, I might as well do it. You know, I set it to where it just backs up at night and stuff like that. And so it literally took me 5 minutes to set up, and now it's a no-brainer. So I'm a guy who has them locally, but then Google Photos and Amazon Photos kind of double redundant backed up on the cloud.
I love it. That's smart. You know, it's something that a lot of people don't think about. I love how you mentioned that you have a Drobo. I too have a Drobo, and I love it. I love it so much. I'm on my second one right now. I love them so much. So
you get what you pay for, as far as the folks listening. You know, if you're setting up your external hard drives and kind of doing this manual RAID system, you know, this mirror system, it's fine, but eventually you kind of lose steam, like, oh, I'll do that next week.
Right,
and then it comes a month, and then you have your hard drive crash, and it's been 6 weeks since you've done your deal. And it's not the end of the world, because you've done it at some point, but, you know, you might have, your pumpkin patch pictures might be lost forever.
Yeah,
and that stinks, because back to
pumpkin
your first
patch,
thing,
Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Back to like what brought this up as parents, and the importance of like photography for future generations. Like, that's my passion with Shultz Photo School. That's why I started Shultz Photo School. People asked me at the beginning, how are you going to compete with Creative Live and Kelby One and Clickin' Moms and, you know, all the household names? I'm like, well, my plan is to not. Like, most of the people there, it's just not my heart. It's not my passion. It's not what I get excited about. Most people who go there already know that they love photography. They already know that they kind of either have a hobby or a side gig or a profession. And my passion is to kind of like be the evangelist of photography, meaning, try and introduce photography to a mom or dad who has never ever said, "Oh yeah, I like photography," or "I love photography," and give them a few lessons to where they get hooked. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, they're like, "Man, I really like photography." And then a year later, they're like, photography is my thing. It's my hobby, and I love photography. That's kind of my, I don't know, it's my dream. That's where I feel like my lane to run in is to totally be a photography evangelist, get people who don't even know that they love photography yet and try and help them love it. Because, back to that point, I think that there is power in art. There really is. I look at some people who are really gifted as photographers, and I admire their work a lot. But to me, there is let me say this again. But to me, there's nothing that can compete with someone capturing their family story and family legacy for themselves later and for their kids later and then for their kids' kids. Like, that's what I think that above all, for 99% of us, the power of photography, it really is in the hands of parents, because photography is so much more than a pretty picture for a wall. Photography is powerful because of story. And we are hardwired for thousands of years to relate to the power of story. And the story of one of us is the story of us all, says Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And so story is so powerful, and that's why I love what I get to do with Shultz Photo School, because I feel like really our big mission is to help parents not just take better pictures of their kids, ultimately so that they can capture those stories and those moments for their lives, for their kids' kids. It's cool stuff.
I love that. That's a pretty clear mission. It's very bold, but it's very clear, and I think that it can be done. So
absolutely.
I have just one last question for you. I know that we've been going on much longer than we were supposed to, so I really appreciate your time. Do you have time for this one last question?
Please. Yep. Fire away.
Perfect. Through your progression as somebody who picked up the Canon G3 to learning photography, buying the 20D, opening up your studio, shooting dozens of weddings per year, hundreds of portrait sessions, becoming a firefighter, like, it's been kind of a crazy journey, all before you even started this educational platform that you have now. Have you, like, throughout that entire journey, I know, I'm not even going to ask have you, but I know that you've made at least one mistake somewhere in there. What is something that you remember, maybe from early on, a mistake that you made that you would advise people that they can learn from your mistakes?
Oh my gosh. You said one more question. This has like 8 hours to one mistake for a guy that's made $1 million. How do we choose this? This is a difficult question, but it's a great question. I think I'm just going to go towards the mistake that I tend to want to make over and over, and that you would think I've learned not to make by now, but I tend to want to make it over and over. And that is to not ship your art, to think that you have to perfect your art before you ship it. So Shultz Photo School, for example, I really need to perfect this course and keep filming lessons and refilming and then have people sign up. You know what I mean? And then what you find is that if you just ship your lessons and ship your school, that the feedback from the clients, from the members, from the people that interact with your product will make it so much better, so much quicker because you get real world feedback. And so even now with the iPhoneography course, I am tempted just to I've filmed most of it, and I'm tempted to push back the deadline to refilm stuff, to make it more perfect. Because I just want the world to see my best. The world will see your best quicker if you get it to them sooner. So you people who are out there wondering if you should take your first portrait session or not for free or for $5 or for $50 or for $150, I don't know. The answer is yes, you should get it out there. You will get so much further if you ship your art and your gift and your calling sooner rather than later. And this is Seth Godin talk, as far as Seth Godin is such a big advocate of shipping. Get it out there to the world. It will get better so much quicker if you get it into the hands of the people who it's for.
Of course.
But it's just something that I do feel like I have to learn over and over again. Right now we're in the middle of migrating our whole learning platform onto another. And, I want to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it before we let our customers, our members, play with it. And obviously it has to be working before I let them into it. But my point is, you know what? If we let them in and work with it, we'll see that probably 9 out of the 10 things that I wanted to change don't even matter.
Right.
They don't care that the header is blue instead of red. These little things that prevent the world from getting your art and your gift because you're busy messing with it, tinkering with it. You know what I mean? So tinker later. I don't know if that's like the answer you're looking for or not.
No,
but
absolutely.
I feel like it's the mistake that I've made too many times and that I continue to make. It's maybe not a mistake because I have shipped stuff, you know what I mean? But in general, I always feel like I need to be brave and get it out there quicker. Just be brave and get it out there. Your podcast, I'm sure you could still be filming in pilot episodes and not have released it. And it would be so much worse than if you not just said, let's let this boat sail for better or worse, So there it is.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have created courses that I never released for that exact reason. And I too am a very big proponent of essentially, you called it just ship your art or ship your work. I call it progress over perfection. Right? Because I was the exact same way. I still am in some aspects. But if you go back to our first, few dozen episodes of the podcast, you're going to think like, this is some helter-skelter type stuff right here. This is just like put together, like all horrible. And this is a waste of time. But it was just that instead of making sure that every aspect was perfect, that we had hosting, that we had, workflows in place, we just did it. And here we are where this is, we're 70 plus episodes in and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't just start somewhere. And beginners feel the exact same way. Just like you said, I don't know if I'm good enough to start, taking portraits of people. Just do it and find out. And that's the only way that you're going to learn. So I love that.
I've heard many times that if you don't look back at version 1 of a product and not be embarrassed by it, then you shipped way too late.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, that's very good. I like that.
Yeah. And you just got to get it out there. And the whole perfection under progress over perfection is definitely wise advice, and you will get much further much quicker. Think about it this way: if you're going for perfection, so everyone waiting to have their first portrait session or whatever their art is, or whatever their work or calling is, you'll be waiting and you'll be working on it for another 3 years or 5 years. If you got out your work or your art that was half as good, but think how many more lives will be changed by your work or your art or your calling just because you shipped it and got it out there half as good than waiting for 5 years to get it out before it's, quote, perfect, which is never going to be perfect. Quit fooling ourselves, right? We need to quit fooling ourselves. So get it out there because you have a chance to impact people if it's out there. But if it's just your course on your hard drive, it has no chance of helping someone out. So get it out there.
Maybe I need to go back and go through the archives a bit and just get some stuff out there for sure.
Let's get it out there on Shultz Photo School.
We'll talk about it afterwards for sure.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, Kyle, I really appreciate your time today. You've graciously added much more time than we had allotted for sure. Can you tell the listeners how they can find you online, or if they want to check out Shultz Photo School, where they can do that?
Yeah, I would just point people to ShultzPhotoSchool.com, and we have a free course there for you just to kind of give you a few quick tips. Some of them we kind of mentioned a little bit. Social media, I'm just not a huge social media guy. I'm on there. You can search for me, but ShultzPhotoSchool.com is the place.
That's the homepage. All right. Well, Kyle, again, man, thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast talking to you about everything photography, the basic storytelling, and even a little bit about the Dodgers. So.
Yeah. No, Raymond, I appreciate it. You've been fun to talk with, so thanks for having me.
I am at a loss for words right now because, like I said, that was a very long interview, and it was just packed, full of content. It was great. I truly enjoyed talking to Kyle. Kyle, if you're listening, I'm not sure that you are because you're just a busy dude who has a lot to do. But if you are, again, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing everything that you did. Guys, if you want to check out any of Kyle's courses or his website, which is really well put together and has a ton of great information and courses, even from past guests, Vinny Puglisi, who we've had on here, who's a Super Bowl photographer, World Series photographer. Ooh, I wonder if he's shooting the world. Anyway, Final Four, like this guy has shot everything. He's the guy when it comes to sports photography, and he's also a parent. So he's the perfect person to teach you about parents taking better pictures of your kids at sporting events, during sports. So if you want to check out any of that, just go to ShultzPhotoSchool.com. All the links to everything that Kyle mentioned are going to be in the show notes today, as well as some of his work and where you can find him online if you want to connect with him. I'm also going to add him to the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. But like he said, and me personally as well, just not big fans of social media, spending all that time on there. So it might be maybe sending him an email. Well, I don't know. Well, this really turned into a tangent. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to do this, but again, I was just really excited for this episode. Guys, that's it for the week. I want you to get out there. I want you to take some new photos of your children if you have children. If you don't, maybe your pets. If not, maybe your parents or your friends, whoever it is. I want you to get out there, and I want your goal for the week to take one good photo of them, right? So whether that be, if it's kids, just take Kyle's advice. Get on their level, eye level. If it's your parent, fill the frame, whatever it is, try to tell that story. Just share it in the Facebook group, the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, which you can now find by just searching Facebook for Beginner Photography Podcast group, I guess, and it'll come up. So do that, request to join. I'd love to have you. I'll see you in there. Share your shots. Guys, get out there, just have fun, keep shooting and stay safe. I love you all, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.